we're going to introduce our first special guest here of the evening. She is a Free Assange activist who's helping out with the Free Assange element of the Rage Against the War Machine rally coming up this weekend. She's also the host of the Misty Winston show on TNT Radio. She's gracious enough to have invited me to guest on that program tomorrow, so I'll be on. But first, she's coming here. Misty, thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We wanted to do something about this Rage Against the War Machine rally. And I was thinking about people who we might want to interview for it and do a couple of segments with. And then I saw that in addition to this Rage Against the War Machine rally in February, there's also a Free Assange rally on April 11th in Washington, D.C. as well. So I figured you were perfect to bring on since I wanted to plug both of those. So can you talk a little bit about either of those, whichever you want first?
Yeah, I mean, we can start. I'll just briefly touch on the April 11th one because we don't have a lot of details yet. We just started planning it, and then we can get into some details. I know there's a lot going on with the Rage Against the War Machine rally. So the Action for Assange is the group that I'm a part of. We have a show on YouTube as well, and Rockfin and all of that stuff. But we regularly organize events in DC for Julian Assange, and April 11th is the 4-year anniversary of him being essentially kidnapped from the Ecuadorian embassy. So we realize it's a Tuesday. That's probably going to make it a little bit more difficult to get people to come out, but it is the anniversary, and I thought it was really important to have a presence in DC on the day. So we just started organizing that. We're starting to get together some ideas of, do we want to be at the DOJ? Do we want to go to the CIA? Do we want to do a march from different media buildings? So we're trying to figure out a game plan, but we'll have more details as that comes up. We're trying to get through this Rage Against the War Machine thing, and then we'll start planning a little bit more extensively. So you can follow Action for Assange on Twitter. It's action_4Assange. And there will be more details that come out as we kind of build upon our organizing there.
Yeah, I saw a video that you did, very moving. I know a lot of people did it. Made a video addressed to his kids about, working to free him. It's a heart-wrenching thing. I mean, that's happening to one man, and then on this large scale, we have potential World War III, potential nuclear war. But both of those agenda items are obviously part of the Rage Against the War Machine rally, which is set to take place in Washington, D.C. this Sunday, February 19th. Now, we know, obviously, that controversy has erupted over the inclusion of many who many deem to be sort of problematic people, including Scott Ritter, who recently withdrew over pressure from the Libertarian Party. Veterans for Peace and Code Pink have stepped down over the inclusion of certain people who they deem too far right for their taste, like Jackson Hinkle, whose stance is on LGBT issues they oppose and therefore don't wish to share a stage with him. But one speaker who remains on the docket is Chris Hedges, who's one of my favorite writers and thinkers of our time. And he published a Substack piece earlier this week explaining his decision to remain on the speaker list. And that piece was called "There Are No Permanent Allies, Only Permanent Power." And so I'm going to read a few little segments from here, and then I'm going to toss to both of you guys to get your takes on this, because I thought this was a great piece. The demands of Rage Against the War Machine rally are ones I share. They include not one more penny for war in Ukraine, negotiate peace, stop the war inflation, disband NATO, global nuclear de-escalation, slash the Pentagon budget, abolish the CIA and military-industrial deep state, abolish war and empire, restore civil liberties, and, of course, free Julian. To those who suffer directly from U.S. aggression, these demands are not academic and theoretical issues. The victims of this militarism do not have the luxury of virtue signaling. They want the rule of law to be reinstated and the slaughter stopped. So do I. They welcome any ally who opposes endless war. For them, it is a matter of life or death. If some of those on the right are anti-war, if they also want to free Julian Assange, it makes no sense to ignore them. These are urgent existential issues that, if we do not mobilize soon, could see us slip into a direct confrontation with Russia and perhaps China, which could lead, of course, to nuclear war. He goes on, those who will pay the steepest price for this paralysis are those wounded and displaced by the war machine. And then he goes on to list, obviously, 900 civilians killed directly and more indirectly as a result of the post 9/11 U.S. wars. And as the empire unravels, the woke left, demanding moral absolutism, marginalizes and discredits itself at a moment of crisis. This myopia is a gift to the oligarchs, militarists, and Christian fascists we must defeat. So I want to get your guys' take on this. Tusker, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I don't really understand the quibbling over supporting this event. I mean, this has to do with ending a particular war, also just anti-war in general. But in my estimation, it just seems to me that if you have a nuclear war, I noticed particularly in that article, it mentioned that, they're collaborating with people that are anti-socialist, they're collaborating with people that are fascist, right-leaning. I'm sorry, in a nuclear war, all the socialists are going to die. Every single marginalized group of people is going to die in a nuclear war. Like, let's keep priorities straight here so that we can actually get something done when it comes to global disaster.
Misty?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think a lot of people are incapable of thinking like a single issue solidarity event. There are people who are speaking at that event that I don't agree with on lots of things. There are people who are organizing the event that I don't like and don't agree with on a lot of things. None of that matters. As Tusker just said, all of our disagreements are a moot point if we're all dead. I mean, and we're really up against it at this point. And we need a revitalization of the anti-war movement so desperately in this country. It has been all but completely neutered. And we are at a really critical juncture right now. We're not only, poking the Russian bear, we're now also starting to with China. I mean, we're 2 nuclear powers now that we're starting to rile up. And it's we need to start coming together against these things. And we need to do it now. I mean, we really don't have time for this nitpicking and, the purity aspect of, it's like people think that we're going to have this magical, perfect coalition where we're going to have a rally where nobody gets angry about any of it. That just isn't going to happen. It doesn't exist. And Chris Hedges has talked about this for a long time. There's no such thing as permanent allies or permanent enemies. And we have to learn to come together where and when we can to fight for whatever we agree on.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he was a great person to write this article, since he has taken stances that could be perceived by some at the rally as sort of too harsh on Russia, if you will, right? Because he said the invasion is a crime, and there are certain people who are going to speak at this rally who don't feel that way. And so I thought that him writing this piece to be like, look, there are people on this rally docket who I think are out of bounds on some issues, or at least incorrect on some issues, right? But I'm willing to share a stage with them because there is a greater purpose here that we are all working towards. I would posit this to some people who are taking issue with, Jackson Hinkle's presence on the stage, or obviously Ritter is out now, but, even some of the other people on that list. Like, what if we were all going to go to East Palestine, Ohio right now, and we were going to engage in mass action, civil disobedience until the water is checked, until every house is checked. None of this bullshit, Mayor Pete. Oh, here's a number to call if you want your house checked. No. We're going to go and we are going to demonstrate en masse in that town until something is done about this. Would we be picky and choosy about who was joining us?
Yes,
no.
They would.
Well,
no, they would.
Well, the
they
Socialist website would.
Yeah.
We're going to get to. But would it make sense? Yeah.
I'm not checking anyone's house unless they are for $15 minimum wage.
Right. If they, and because I organize all the time, right? And I often ask people, do you expect me legitimately to walk around every event that I organize with a checklist and ask everybody? And if you're guilty of wrongthink, I'm going to ask you to leave? Of course not. That's absurd. It really is silly. I think that there is legitimate criticism of every action, every event that's planned. I think that you can be constructive in that criticism, but the stuff that I have seen leveled at the Rage Against the War Machine rally is really kind of silly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing. And how much of this do you think is a function of the left, certain parts of the left, most parts of the left who we deal with, because we are online people ourselves. We wouldn't be doing the show if we weren't online. But I always said part of the left's problem is that they're too online, and they get a sense that the whole world is online. Therefore, because when we're online, we are able to vet everyone we interact with, right? If I want to tweet at you, I can go back and read every tweet you ever sent. And I can say, aha, you said something back in 2019 that I hate. Therefore, I'm not going to follow you, or I'm going to block you or mute you, whatever. Life isn't like that. You get out in a field with somebody, you get out in a rally crowd, you fill a gymnasium with people. Their histories are not readily available to you. You don't have that information. So you can't vet everybody. And that's actually good for organizing, not bad for organizing. So as two other people who are obviously joining me as being very online people, what do you think about that? Are we too online? Is this a barrier? That's okay. I have 2 cats and a dog. And
they're insane. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on
war
with them
zone
right now.
in here, believe me. That's why I have this curtain up, because in back of me there's pandemonium.
It's Zoomy time, apparently. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. But yes, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that, it's very, we're seeing it happen in East Palestine right now, is when, shit hits the fan, the people that help you are your neighbors. And you're not going to say, oh, well, who did you vote for last election? Oh, I can't accept your help because you voted for Trump or you voted for Biden. You just help each other. And when it really boils down to it, none of that stuff really matters. And Julian Assange has talked about this a million times. And he said all of our differences on ideologies really don't make any difference because, first of all, our ideas about each other and those ideologies, those are sold to us. Those ideas are sold to us by the same people that lie us into these wars, right? Like the word socialist has been completely co-opted and bastardized. It doesn't even have a meaning anymore. Same way with libertarian, same way with, all of these words. All of these words have been, that's why I don't like labels. They're always used to divide us. And so all of our ideas about each other, we really don't even know. And I think that labels are a really easy way for people to be lazy and just kind of peg you for who they want to believe that you are, without actually taking the time to get to know what you stand for. And so it's really disappointing to see that there's been so many people who, they are incredibly online. And it makes me sad because I feel like the online left, Caitlin Johnstone has a great tweet about this out earlier today. But she's just talking about how, and I say this all the time, you isolate yourself into this bubble. And then I feel like a lot of these people are more concerned with being able to be smugly superior in their little safe space than they are about actually getting anything done. Because listen, I'm selfish. I want to end these wars. And I don't think the people of Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, Iran, Venezuela, all of these, Somalia, all of these countries that we're brutalizing, I don't think they care that Jimmy Dore has a house. I just don't think that they care.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Tusker, do you have anything to add to that before we move on?
Yeah, sure. As far as Misty, I think you're correct. The labels have gotten bastardized. And I think it's just become something where people log in online and then they claim whatever label, even though they have no idea what it means. They actually haven't done the history. They haven't looked into anything like that, really actually done any research. And then they just claim it as a title. And then guess what you can do to organize against something like the Rage Against the War Machine thing? You can have so-called respected leftists or whatever come out with these articles, and then that sways people away. They just look at a snapshot of it, and then they can use a couple of those keywords. Oh, you mean this isn't, there are people up there that are anti-socialist or, blah, blah, blah. And then that's just a signal to someone, oh, well, I identify as that. That's what I'm told is a good thing to be. So, I can't go to that. I can't support that. And this is terrible for everyone. It's a siloing off of anyone that's willing to get anything done. And if you're not willing to get anything done, then stay home and stay online and don't comment. Because certainly none of the smear pieces, they didn't start their own anti-war rally.
Well, here's the thing about that, because you're somewhat right about that, but they would argue they have, and actually World Socialist Website references that, which is part of the reason why I want to read that piece, because while what you say maybe was technically not correct, it may as well be right. World Socialist Website put out a hit piece on the rally. This, I believe, dropped today. And I'm going to read a few.
Totally unsurprising from them, by the way.
It's funny you say that, because maybe I just haven't read them much, because to be honest, I've always found that website a bit boring. And so ultimately I'm an entertainment junkie, right? So if I find something boring, I just kind of check out. But they dropped an article by Joseph Kishore disavowing the rally for its alliance with the extreme right, as they say. Now, after trashing the rally for its inclusion of anti-socialists, right-wingers, and even fascists, they called out Hedges specifically for his article defending The rally. Hedges is known as a radical critic of American imperialism, heavily influenced by Noam Chomsky and substituting middle-class moralizing for scientific political analysis. Hedges rejects Marxism and is simply implacably hostile to the Trotskyites, an element of his politics that has become ever more explicit. His writings are characterized by a demoralized, even obsessive pessimism and explicit opposition to the organization of the working class as an independent political force. He is not necessarily opposed to working class participation in a popular movement, but only in a subordinate political role. Now that is just a straight up smear, and I would argue an outright lie. Yeah. I mean, Chris Hedges, here's an article that he wrote for Salon just about a year ago. America's new class war. Organized labor is back. Forget the woke Democrats and timid union leaders. Workers across the country are standing up and fighting back. And he goes on to say here, the only way left to alter the balance of power and force concessions from the ruling capitalist class is to mobilize and strike. Forget the woke Democrats. This is class war. So the idea that Chris Hedges is interested in sort of subordinating or bringing to heel a working class movement is just absolute nonsense. I mean, that's just an absolute smear. That's absurd. But they go on. The role of Rage Against the War Machine rally is not to develop a movement against imperialist war, but to confuse and disorient young people. The open support for the U.S.-NATO war against Russia by the Democratic Socialists of America and other pseudo-left groups has facilitated the ability of the right wing to fraudulently present itself as an opponent of war with the assistance of Hedges and company. And can we just stop there? I don't even have to read the rest of that section. If you think the DSA is too soft on war, then why are you also tearing down Hedges and this rally? Like, this should be called the Up Your Own Ass website, because that's what these people are. Like, nobody's good enough for them. What do they think? They're going to mobilize 50 million Trotskyists to go march on Washington? Like, this is utterly delusional. This brings to mind a quote by, it was Glenn Greenwald, who said, the left seems to be the only political faction that seeks to make itself smaller. They actually seek to shrink, not to expand, because it's a religious motivation. It's not a political motivation. It's a way of expressing your purity as the one true distilled leftist, right? So anyway, I'm not going to read the rest of that because that would just be a waste of time. But what do you guys think of that segment there?
I talk about this all the time. Again, it's like I hate to even call them left. I hate labels anyways, but we'll use that for the sake of simplicity here. But the online left, it legitimately feels like they are not interested in winning. They don't want to actually get anything done. They just want to feel, better than everybody else. You know what I mean? Like they don't want anybody to join their club. They're not willing to do any outreach whatsoever. And it seems as if they are making the assertion that anybody to the right of Bernie Sanders is a literal Nazi. And I hate to tell you, there's a whole lot of people in between Bernie Sanders and actual Nazis. I live in small town Ohio. It's Trump country around here, surrounded by them. They're not bad people. Are they wrong on some things? Yes. Have they been propagandized against the wrong things and the wrong people? Absolutely. But they're not bad people. They're hardworking people who are getting screwed over by the exact same system we're getting screwed over by. And they agree with us on a lot. If you strip away a lot of the labels and the kind of socialist language and stuff, if you talk to them about healthcare, for example, they want healthcare. Like, if you just talk to them and you don't sneer at them and look down your nose at them and treat them as if they're, idiots, it's very easy to have conversations with them and realize that we do have a lot of things in common. We do have a lot of common enemies, and we can work together on those things. But these people that we're talking about, they won't even attempt it. It's like they think that they're above having those conversations with people. And it's a really frustrating thing, because we're never going to get anything done if we don't seek to bring more people into the fight.
As far as them smearing Chris Hedges, it sounds to me like every single thing that they said about Chris Hedges is actually projection on their part. They're literally describing themselves. That's how you know someone's not being genuine and they're only seeking to divide. Whatever small amount, like small movement that the actual left is trying to build, like, we just want to get something done. People that don't want to get something done, they write hit pieces.
Yeah, and that really does seem the motivation. I mentioned on a whole, for a lot of people, it's this religious expression of purity, right? But I also think, because I've heard it said by some people, because they have a lot of famous people at this Rage Against the War Machine rally, right? I've heard it said that, they're doing this to build their brand, and there's a lot of ego involved to build audiences for their shows, or some, people who want to run for office. And, that's fine. Look, you're always going to have ego involved whenever you have public figures involved in anything, right? But that ignores the other dynamic, which is that there's egos on the other side. There's branding on the other side. I'm sorry, Code Pink telling Medea Benjamin they don't want her speaking, that's about ego and branding as well, just as much as it might be about ego and branding to a certain extent for whatever podcasters or YouTubers are showing up. Like, these organizations have brands, they have audiences, they have followers, they have funders, and they want to stay on brand. And a lot of them feel very threatened by the idea of going off brand because they don't want to alienate their audiences or their followers or their donors. Just because they don't have a show doesn't mean there's not ego and branding on their part. And so I think organizations like Code Pink, Veterans for Peace, websites like World Socialist Web Site, they have a certain element of ego in this as well. What do you guys think?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely dead on. And I think Code Pink really disappointed me. I mean, it's not surprising necessarily. I've worked with them some on Assange stuff. It's not really surprising. They're I hate to say mainstream, but they are kind of, you know what I mean? Like, they really are worried about their image and all of that stuff, and which I get to some extent, because you do have donors that you need to worry about, and you've got to keep the lights on and all of that stuff. But it's really unfortunate that kind of thing takes precedence over, preventing a nuclear war. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what books you read. I don't care what ism you subscribe to. If you want to work with me on preventing a nuclear war and then tearing down the military-industrial complex, then welcome aboard. It doesn't mean we have to be besties. We don't have to go out to dinner. We're not going to go on vacation together or have play dates with our kids. But if we're going to work together on that thing that I desperately care about, then I'm happy to have you on board. We need the numbers. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of ego involved on both sides. And again, that's not to say that you can't ask questions about these events, that you can't criticize these events. I am totally open. There was a lot of conversation about being transparent about the finances. Absolutely, 100%. And they have promised that they're going to be. They haven't really paid for anything yet. So once they pay for all that stuff, it's all going to be available online. And I think that that's a legitimate criticism and a legitimate question to ask. But when you start to see these people just seek to tear it down at any cost, and they jump from talking point to talking point. First, it was Ritter, then it was the finances, then it was, you've got the little Rushites, and and once they start jumping from subject to subject and they can't even focus their criticism, that's when it's just a smear job and it's not really about being constructive. And again, everybody who's criticizing it, you are more than welcome to host your own event. But we need more of these events, not less. So if you have an issue with the way this one's being run, then please start your own.
Oh, that was the other thing I forgot to mention. That's why I should have read the last slide. World Socialist Web Site mentioned, hey, we had an event on December 10th. We had a rally, an anti-war rally on December 10th. That was a socialist war rally. That's a worthwhile war rally. Oh, really? Because I never heard of it until I read this hit piece that you did on Rage Against the War Machine. You're not a movement unless you move, unless you build, unless you act, unless you move forward. Turns out that rally looked to be a YouTube rally, an online virtual event that got 5,000 views over the past 2 months. We can get 10,000 views making fun of Kyle Kalinski's hair. And they got 5,000 views on a supposed war rally that they're so proud of. That was the pure example of the war rally. So yes, Tusker, to your point before, it's not that they're not organizing them. It's that they suck at organizing them because they only appeal to people who already agree with them on every single thing, which for a Trotskyist website, I'm sorry, this is America. There ain't that many people out there who you're going to get involved in a Trotskyist anti-war rally.
Please clap.